Hello and welcome back to our sketching series. We are on lesson 5 today and we are continuing with our technique of shading. We already know how to do solid and gradual shading depending on the type of object that we want to create the illusion of depth or three-dimensionality. And today what we're going to do is look at a few other types of shading because there's a number of them that you can use, not only to depict or create the illusion of a 3D object, but also to create the illusion of texture. What's texture? Well, it's what an object feels like or what kind of material it's made of. If you take a look around the room that you're in, take a look at the shirt you're wearing, the fabric that it's made out of compared to the pencil that you're using, compared to the table that you're drawing on, and even the paper itself, they all have different textures or different ways that they feel. And when we're drawing, we sometimes want to create that illusion as well. And so the shading techniques that we're going to look at today can help you depict some of those textures that you might want to start adding into your sketching. So we are going to just grab our pencils and get right to it. Today I've been lucky enough, since we last met, I actually was cleaning up my studio a little bit, and I happened to find some of my drawing pencils. So I'm pretty happy about that. I'm coming to this lesson armed with a 2B, a 4B, and a 6B. So that really is all I need when I head into my sketching. If you happen to look around in some of those pencil drawers and things, and maybe you found a B pencil, that's awesome. I would encourage you to use it today. If you are still using your HB pencil, that is certainly fine as well, because as we know from our previous grayscales, we have a lot of different kinds of shades that we can get from our standard HB. So whatever pencil you're working with today, not a big deal. It's going to be useful for this lesson. I'm going to use my 2B just because I have it on hand. And we're going to start looking at our first type of shading. So the first one we're going to look at is called blended or blending. Blending is that type of shading that most of you are pretty familiar with, especially when it comes to a pencil. So, you see people and they just will kind of color in a shade and then use their finger or even a Kleenex or something like that to blend it out. And so that's the type of shading we use often if we want to create really smooth looking surfaces. We want something to look like it's really gradually going from light to dark. So, once again, a very nice smooth surface. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to take a look at our types of shading and think about our grayscale. So I want you to put light, medium, and dark. And what we're going to do is, as we go through these different types of shadings, we're going to just practice making the grayscale of them, because if we're doing a solid shading, we don't need to worry about that as much. But if we are going to be using some kind of gradual type shading, we need to know how to create all our different lights, mediums, and darks. So when it comes to blended shading, often what you'll want to do is you'll work one of two ways. You can either start really light, or you can work your way dark, or you can start really dark and work your way light. I'm going to just try going dark, because then I can see how far I can smudge. So I've got my 2B pencil. I know it'll smudge pretty well. And if I'm creating this, this is my nice dark. And again, if you are lucky enough to have a 6B at your house, that's what I'm going to use. You'll notice that this will even smudge more. It smudges more. Do you remember why? See that? Really easy to smudge because it's got that nice soft lead. If I want to go into my medium, again, I'm just going to press a little lighter. And then I'm going to smudge. And you can see you get that nice medium shade, and then light. I'm going to press even lighter. At this point, you might notice that your finger's getting a little bit gray, so you may, depending on how gray it is, want to wash off your finger or turn to using some kind of a Kleenex or something. Otherwise, you can use a different finger. Doesn't matter what you use to smudge. And here you'll notice the dark, medium, light transition. So medium and dark, you're still gonna see a little bit of your actual marks that you made because you can't blend everything out. But in light, if you go light enough, you'll be able to not have any marks at all. And in fact, sometimes what I do if I'm starting with my dark, I might just blend it so it's nice and dark. And then I take that residual that's on my finger and I'll put it into my lighter area. And then I don't even have to draw anything. It actually just brings it right over. So you can play around a little bit with, oh, you can see my lead is just falling off. That's how soft it is. And I can do that with my medium too. I can just start transferring some of it over and notice it builds it up. But I can also, for the medium, put a little bit in there too. I don't mind doing that, but I really want most of it to be the blend, not the actual pencil marks. All right, and so that's blending. And as I said, that's often used for a nice smooth texture. So if you had a nice sphere that was made out of glass or made out of mirror, that kind of thing, or if you had a tabletop, anything that's smooth, you might want to use blending. So that's our first type of shading. Next, we're going to look at hatching. Sorry, that's a C. My printing is a little bit messy. So hatching with a C. I'm teaching you these next ones because often I find with students, blending is the one that most people already know how to do. It's kind of your go-to. It's the one that you use the most. So these other ones may be new concepts to you, or maybe you've already heard of one or two of them, but it's just really good practice and review. Hatching is just made up of a series of lines that go the same direction. So they need to be going the same direction. It does not matter which direction they're going. So I could have hatching go this way. I could have hatching going this way. But whatever direction you decide on, you need to commit to it. And that's the way that you're going to continue going while you're hatching that area. So these are just hatch marks. That's what these marks here are called. And when it comes to using hatching, what you're going to do, if you want something to be very light, you're going to press lighter and you're going to leave more space in between your marks. So see, there's quite a bit of space here. If I want it to look darker, what do you think I need to do? I'm going to draw these a bit darker for you because I'm not sure how well they're coming through on the video. So here we have our light shade. Now, if I want to do medium, what I need to do is to create the illusion that it's darker, I'm actually going to draw my lines closer together. Notice I'm still going the same direction, haven't changed. I'm not using a ruler, not all of my lines are perfectly straight. That is okay, that's not the goal. We're just trying to get them in the right, getting them closer together to create a slightly darker feel. And notice I haven't pressed harder. I'm not changing how hard I press on my pencil. I'm changing how close I put my lines. So that's our medium hatching. And if putting our lines closer together makes it a little bit darker, you probably have guessed, to make it really dark, we're going to put our lines even closer together. And again, I'm not changing how much pressure I put on my pencil. I'm not changing the direction that I'm going. I'm simply putting my lines closer together. And hopefully you can see that, yeah, for sure, we notice that these hatches are much lighter than these ones. Obviously, there's lots, just like our grayscale, there's lots of shades that could go in between the examples that we've just shown. But this is just to give you an idea of what that looks like and how you can use it. So that is hatching. Next we have cross hatching. Cross hatching is what you probably better know now as hashtags. And so it basically is where you're doing two hatches and then you're crossing them with two other hatches. So again, it's just a bunch of hashtags going in all different directions. Okay, So what we're going to do right now is the same thing that we did for our hatching and blending. We're going to start off with light. In order to do light, we're going to have hatches. We're going to have lots of space between them. Maybe they're big, spread out. And this is our light. This is how we would cross hatch nice and lightly on an object to create a lighter shade. If we want to make our cross hatching a little bit more of a medium shade, what do you think we're going to do? Exactly the same thing that we did for hatching. We're going to put our hashtags or our cross hatches closer together, maybe slightly smaller, maybe more of them in the same area. And as you look at that, you can see that, yeah, for sure, that does create the illusion that this is a darker area than this one. So that's great. That's exactly what we want to do. Next, we're going to go even darker. And so just like we did with hatching, we're going to put our cross hatches even closer together, and you can actually overlap them. Overlapping just means that you are putting them on top of each other. So they go on top of each other. I'm not pressing any harder than I did for my other hatches. It's just that there's more of them in a smaller area. And so as you can see, it definitely creates the illusion that this is darker than this and definitely darker than the lightest one. Now, one thing I know with cross hatching, a lot of people when they first start out, if they're going to cross hatch, for example, let's do our, foreshortened square. Say I was going to cross hatch this area. Some people, instead of doing small little hashtags, what they'll do is they'll hatch one way and then they'll hatch the other way. This is not actual cross hatching. So of course it's a mark that you can make and you can use it and it may give you the design that you want, but this is not actual cross hatching. In order for it to be cross hatching, you have to put them with 2 and 2, just like we're doing here. Okay. But again, once we understand how to cross hatch, we are definitely welcome to take it and start using it in different ways, but it definitely does give you a different look. So just know that this is not cross hatching. This is, you have to do your cross hatches 2 and 2. Okay. Great, so that's cross hatching. Next we have, this is a fun one, especially if your hand's starting to hurt a little bit from all the line making, and that is scribbling. So scribbling's lots of fun. It's just exactly what it sounds like. We're going to scribble in all different directions. Kind of reminds me of when you were young and maybe pretending to learn how to print or handwrite, and this is maybe what you did. So that's kind of what we're doing as well. So in order to make a light scribble, we're just going to make nice, big, loose scribbles that take up a lot of space, still have a lot of negative or white space behind them to give it that airy lightness to it. To create a medium shade, just like we did with the above two, we're actually just going to draw smaller scribbles. There's going to be more of them in a smaller area. Again, I'm not pressing any darker or any heavier than I was previously, but because I'm just putting more scribbles in the same area, it creates that illusion, or it makes it just look darker because we have less of that white or negative space behind it. And then finally, if we want to make it look really dark, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to make our scribbles even smaller and we're going to start overlapping them. So, you know, and everybody, it's funny, everyone has their own distinct scribble style. I find I'm really rounded. Some people get a little bit more liney. I guess it depends what your goal is, what you're trying to accomplish with your drawing. So anyways, here you can see though that no matter what type of scribble you're doing, as you overlap it and do more of it in the same area, it actually creates a darker shade. So that's awesome. And that brings us finally to our last one that we're going to be looking at today, and that is stippling. Stippling, some of you may know it as pointillism. It's where we use dots. And anyone who's done this before, you know this takes a long time to do. So you're literally just putting down dots on your page. Just like the other techniques that we've learned today, if we want it to look light, we're going to put less dots and we're going to have more space in between the dots in order to get more of that negative or white paper coming through. If we want it to look medium, we're going to make our dots closer together. And we can see as we do that, it naturally makes it look darker. And finally, if we want to make it look really dark, we're going to put them even closer together. Oh my goodness, you have to be a very patient person to commit to stippling. It takes a lot of time, and you have to be precise because you want these to be dots. The goal is that these are actual dots. So there we go. You can see I'm not going to do a huge area because my goodness, it takes forever. So you can see though, by putting more dots in the same area closer together, it does make it look darker as opposed to more space in between and even more space where it looks light. And you can see now that we've got all different ways of creating shade, and they actually do look quite different. And so you can imagine, you know, maybe using your scribble for a ball of wool, maybe you're stippling for a sandy beach, or an orange if you're doing that for a still life. So there's lots of different ways that you can use these different types of techniques in your drawing to create texture and just add even more variety and interest to your drawing. One thing I want to mention with stippling, take a good look at yours and notice, are they nice round dots? I told you this is a technique that's meant for people who are patient and willing to put in the extra effort. Because sometimes what I find, or often what I find when students are starting to do stippling, especially in a classroom setting, they notice that it can get noisy on their desk. So I find people really like doing this a lot. And sometimes they forget what they're doing and they actually just want to be the loudest person in the class, or they think this is really fun. They get into kind of a rhythm. But as you notice, although it is much faster than what we were doing, are these actual dots? No. What ends up happening is when you hit it hard like this and go down, it almost makes like a little comma. So you get a dot with a tail at the end of it. That is not a stipple. So you do not want to do this. It's fun. You can play around with it. Are there times you might want to use it in your drawing? Sure, probably. Maybe they'll create a cool effect for something. But just know that if you're doing this, that's not actually the stippling technique. So stippling technique is much more controlled. You're not going to be making huge sounds. You're not going to be moving your hand up and down like this. You're really just moving from your wrist and adding more dots. And you'll notice I can't make them as dark as these dots because I just don't have the same force coming down from my lead. So just keep that in mind and know the difference. But of course you can use both, just like that, the cross hatching and this technique. Definitely you can be using them in your drawings, but just know the difference so that you know when you're following the different types of shading and when you're kind of forging on and doing your own thing. Both of them are totally acceptable. Great. So this is really what I wanted to cover with you today. And what I would encourage you to do is to flip over on your sketchbook and to draw in the chart that I have done. So you'll notice right here, I've got solid and gradual in pencil on at the top of my sheet, and then I've put in blending, hatching, cross-hatching, scribbling, and stippling, and I've practiced each of the techniques on a solid surface and on a gradual blended surface. And this is just really great practice for you to master these skills and these different techniques and to just get your creative juices running and starting to think about, oh yeah, what could I use them for? What does this kind of remind me of? How might I want to try this in one of my actual drawings? So I would encourage you to do that. When you're doing it, remember you've got your objects, but you also need a light source. For my practice, I just put my light source up in the top right. I imagined it there. I'm not drawing it in. Remember, I talked to you last time that you don't always have to draw in your light source. So this time I'm not drawing it in, but it is evident where it is by where my lights and my darks are, okay? And notice each of the techniques, how they've been used to create the illusion of depth and three-dimensionality. So I'm going to leave you to do that because you're totally competent and have all the skills for that right now. But you'll notice that I've also added a column with the solid and gradual beside it. Well, I've done that because I know some of you are like, Mrs. Warren, I don't really get why we need to know all these different types. I'm just going to do blending. I'm going to stick with it. I've done it for as long as I can remember, so that's what I'm going to do. Well, I want you to know that with pencil, you do have that option. Although variety, I do encourage you to try new things and have variety. But yes, definitely with your pencil, if you want to blend, you can blend all day, all night, no problem. But sometimes you're not going to be using pencil. Sometimes you're going to be using other drawing materials. You might be using pens, you might be using markers, you might be using something that just does not have a blending capability. And so knowing how to shade with other techniques is really important. So what I want to encourage you to do, and some of you at this point are ready to change from the pencil just for a minute, even though this is a drawing class. And so I would encourage you to just find a pen that you've got laying around at home, one that has a pretty decent flow to it. It can be a black pen, it could be a blue pen. I do love a black pen personally, but I'm going to use blue for this because I think it'll make it easier to see the difference. And what I would encourage you to do is do your foreshortened square and a sphere, solid gradual, and then make a pen column. In your pen column, what you can do is practice these techniques using something that's not going to blend as easily. So solid is going to be very easy, as you know. We're just coloring it in, and that's certainly something that we can do with a pen. We can color in with a pen, no problem. So doing blended on a solid type shape is possible. We can do it, right? I'm coloring it in. Nice. So I can do it. Notice, however, when I turn to my sphere and I'm trying to blend through smudging. Some of you guys have tried this before. It does not work very well. So if I take my hand and I try and blend, I can blend it a little bit, but it's certainly not getting the results of this gorgeous pencil. I just can't do it. I can't control it enough. I can't make the shading variety enough. It just looks messy. So blending really with a pen does not work at all or very well in the way that I want to use it. And so that's where using hatching, cross-hatching, scribbling, and stippling is going to come in really handy. So if you notice, if I want to hatch, if I want to create shading that way, no problem. I can draw straight lines with my pen. I can draw them closer together if I want this area to be darker. And I can do the same thing if I want a mid-tone. Awesome. When it comes to hatching on my sphere, I'm going to start by putting some really far apart lines that are closer to my light source. And then as I get further away from my light source, I'm going to draw them shorter and closer together. And then as I get farthest away from my light source, I'm going to draw them even closer. Notice they're still all going the same way. I can tweak it a little bit as I need to. Awesome, looks really good. So I can hatch with my pen, no problem. Cross hatching, let's give it a go. Again, remember, two one way, two the other way. Hatching is cross hatching is a piece of cake with my pen. And again, I want this side, if my light source is top right, then this side is going to be the darkest. It's the opposite from the light source. And so that means I'm going to have smaller hatches. Or cross hatching. They're going to be closer together. In fact, I'm going to overlap them. Awesome. Love that. Creates a different look, right? Creates a different feel than the solid or the hatch. And so again, depending on what your goal is in your sketch, you're going to choose the type of shading that you want to use to create not only the three-dimensional quality, but also the texture. My medium side, remember I could make my hatches a little bit bigger if I want. I definitely am going to have them further apart. And again, they can go opposite directions, which it actually looks better to have them in opposite or in different directions, because then it doesn't look like it's just a fabric with, you know, hashtag pattern on it or something. So there you go. And if I want to do the same thing with my sphere, again, as I get closer to my light source, my cross hatching is getting bigger. There's more space in between. And then as I get further away from my light source, they're going to get smaller maybe. They're definitely going to get closer together. They're going to overlap a bit. And overlapping really does create that darker feel, which makes us have the illusion that it's three-dimensional and that this is the area that's further away from the light source. Pen is a great, it's great to practice with a pen because you can't really erase it. You can't get too overly concerned, and it definitely shows you right away if you've been successful. So I do encourage you to do some practices with your pen. Maybe practice if you have different colors. This would be a perfect time where you can even add different colors and just have a little bit of fun with it. But again, if you want to stick with your pencil, that's fine too. I just like to show you these different options because it just allows you to have that much more freedom when you're drawing and when you're creating different things. Scribbling, can we do it with a pen? 100% we can, absolutely. I want this to be darkest, so I'm doing lots of scribbles. All right. Notice my rounded scribbles. If I wanted to try something different, maybe I want to do more kind of sharp edge scribbles. Notice the different effect it gives me. Right? So even the type of scribble that you're using can change the effect or change the look and texture of the object that you're creating. So play around with your scribbles, have some fun. Same thing, if our light source is on the top right, we know that this is the lightest area, and so our scribbles, as they get closer to the top, are going to be really spread out, nice and light. As they get closer to the opposite side, they're going to get darker, they're going to get smaller, in order to really create that illusion of depth. Great. Perfect. So again, notice the difference just in how they look and in what you might be envisioning them eventually being in one of your drawings. And finally, stippling. Are you ready? Here we go. My goodness, I don't use this one very much because I'm not as patient as people who master this are. Scribbling and hatching, cross-hatching, that's more my style when it comes to drawing. But my goodness, there are some people who have the patience and perseverance to do stippling, and their drawings look amazing. So if you're one of those people, awesome. I love your end results and your work, and I'm going to leave it to you to be the stipple master because it's just a little too time-consuming for what I find I like to do in my drawings. But for sure, there's times where you need them, and I will use stippling time to time if I'm looking for a texture. There's some artists, however, who they'll do giant drawings or paintings just using stippling, which are amazing. They look so cool. So that might be something fun to try out too. Play around with. Maybe stippling is right up your alley. And again, remember, when we want to make it dark, we're going to put the dots close together, and we're not pounding down. We're not making those dots with tails. That's not what we want to do when it comes to stippling. We want to be really precise. We want to be thoughtful about how we're laying down our dots, making sure that they're nice and round as best we can. And again, if you want it to look like it's darker, further away from the sun, has some shadow shading on it, then we're going to put our dots closer together. And if we don't mind having it a little bit, and if we want it to look like it's less dark, more of a medium shade, then we're just putting our dots further apart from one another. Same thing when it comes to our sphere. Our dots furthest away from the sun. I keep saying sun, but of course you can use whatever light source. I just really want the sun. I'm ready for summer. So here we go. I'm putting my dots in really close to one another, the furthest away from our light source. Oh my goodness. And as we get closer, they get even further apart. So it really creates that illusion. Beautiful. It does look so good. It's worth practicing and trying a few things, but it does take a long time. Awesome. So I would really encourage you to get out a pen and try doing the techniques that we've just learned in pencil and using them in pen, because it's a lot of fun and adds a little color to your sketchbook and just another tool to your toolkit of awesome creating abilities that you have and that you can bring to your sketches. Something really fun, if you do find that you're enjoying sketching with your pen, in October, some of you may know about Inktober. It's a really fun event that gets posted all over social media. And basically for the 31 days of October, they give you a prompt, so a different topic each day, and then you, using only ink, sketch what that prompt means to you. And so then people post them and share their work, and it looks really, really cool. So Inktober, you're only using pens, you're only using ink. So knowing these types of techniques is going to be really important. And so I just thought I'd share a couple that might inspire you this over the next couple of days until we meet again for our lessons, to work either with your pencil or your pen. So here's one that I did. I think peach maybe was the prompt for this. So I was inspired by James and the Giant Peach. And so again, this is just a big peach. You'll notice it's just a variation of a sphere. And again, it's all in ink. It's black ink. So needed to use lots of scribbling. You'll see some cross hatching and lots of kind of angular sharp type, scribbles. If you take a look, you'll notice the light source is here, and as we get away from the light source, this is the darkest area. You probably have some fruit or something round lying around your house. You may want to give that a try. Maybe you have a couple of, maybe you're lucky enough to have some colored pens lying around, or even colored pencils if you want to do this. And so here was one, I can't remember what the prompt was. I think it might have been fat. And so I thought of an avocado because it has all that awesome healthy fat. So you may even have an avocado lying around your house right now. You can see, again, I've used different types of pen shading that we used over here to create these objects. And then I had some green ink. I had a green pen lying around. And so I just filled in a little bit of the avocado with coloring too. So that was kind of fun. So maybe if that's you, if you have some colored ink, you might want to try finding some things around your house and sketching them out, adding a little bit of color and seeing how that goes. If you don't have fruit lying around your house, not a big deal. Here's one of a shoe that I did. So we probably all have shoes lying around. So again, it's all ink, can't use any blending. And so you'll notice there's lots of cross hatching, scribbling. There's solid shading in these areas that have faces. And so lots of different shading techniques that we've looked at today to get this type of drawing completed. So I'm just showing you these because I really want you to understand that for sure, if you find that you're really enjoying sketching and want to continue with it, you'll definitely be using these techniques in your drawing, and they just add extra interest and variety. Here's another one. The last one I'll show you today, it's just a tied up rope. And so you can see it's some play on using hatching, but it's also using shading too. So thinking about where our light source is to create those dark areas and those light areas where it's being hit. So those are just some inspirations. You'll notice they're just small. I didn't take, they're not huge. They didn't take piles of time, but they were just little practices for me to do. And you'll just notice the numbers maybe on them. Those were the days that prompt was. So I was posting these on my social media so that I was sharing them with the artist community. So I would encourage you, if you're really enjoying this, look for that in October. It is so much fun, lots of good ideas, and a great way to share your own work. So right now, what I'd like you to do is take a break. Your hand might be a little tired, especially from all that stippling. And when you're feeling inspired, skip to a new page and maybe try out some of these new techniques that we've used, either using pencil or pen. And enjoy, have fun. I am looking forward to seeing you again at lesson 6. Until then, stay safe and have a great day.